looking for escapism, I just want to escape.
Welcome back to my disembodied voice. Now, there are some things in life which just make me happy. The McRib, mixing tramadol with a glass of wine, Christina Hendricks, Payday, and the video for the Cardigan song My Favourite Game. And another thing which always makes me happy is when you get a big blockbuster movie or even a low-budget monster flick which has rounded characters and caters for the human story as much as it does for the monsters, robots, or whatever the CGI threat is. Recently, Godzilla Minus One showed us that, even though the film allegedly cost less than $15 million, you could put a human story in the heart of a big, stomping monster flick and win critical acclaim. Now, in comparison, take the Monsterverse, which has brought us Godzilla, Godzilla King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. Kong, and Godzilla X Kong, or Godzilla times Kong, or Godzilla multiplied by Kong. I don't know. And just look at how, whilst the CGI is great and we've had some fantastic kaiju fights, the human story has been as bland as Marge Simpson's boiled celery, and the movies have suffered because of this. So how do you make a good human story at the heart of a monster or alien or robot flick? Is there an approach which works? What psychological tenets are needed? And how do you keep things moving, interesting and emotional between the CGI city trashing moments? So for today's video, join me as we look at 3 movies which have character in spades and offer real human emotion to the creature chaos, and we will delve into why this is, the psychological reasons and other facets of the writing process. Now, we're picking 3 movies today, and whilst I'm not saying that all of these films are masterpieces, they all have done one thing in common, and that's how the human element is handled in contrast to the monsters or the robots. So, we're going to look at character model, psychology of the protagonists, and what makes them believable. So, our movies today are the first Transformers from 2007, The Relic from 1997, and Jaws from 1975. Now, before we start, I know Jaws has no CGI. Made in a time before computers could make CGI sharks, the reason I have chosen it is because Spielberg made massive changes to the book of which the movie is based on, stating that if I didn't change things, you would have been rooting for the shark. So, as he saw what needed changing and was afflicted with a mechanical shark which hardly ever worked, he had to rely on his characters. Also, as Jaws is one of the greatest movies ever made and Transformers is far from that, I'm fully aware that we are in very contrasting states here, but for the purposes of this video, the focus is on the characters, and considering the Transformers franchise went up its own back passage and became a series of god-awful movies, the first movie is at least a very enjoyable and guilty pleasure of Michael Bay mayhem. It also knew its audience, aimed purely at the boys and the lads who'd played with Transformers toys. It offered everything they wanted: big robots, attractive girls, amazingly fast cars. Overall, I went to the cinema to see it with all my friends, and we all agreed it was pretty darn decent. Right then, let's crack on. Okay, first things first, let's look at our model, and for today's discussion, we're going to use something I've come up with, and then, using some psychological facets tied in as well as some evidence-based work, we will apply each stage to our 3 movies. So, let's start with the acronym for our How to Make a Great Character and Build Believable Human Emotions model, which is called FEDD, F-E-D-D. And for clarity, the acronym stands for Flawed, Empathy, Defined, Dichotomy, and Parallel. Okay, the first category first, and we'll start with flawed. This is the character's wants and needs, humanising attributes which feel local to the viewer, and this creates believable situations and relatable junctures which we can identify with. Now, it's important that we differentiate between character wants and needs. Basically, wants and needs are the 2 most important parts of a character development. A character's want is external, defines the action, focuses the plot, and is obvious to both audience and protagonist. However, the need is internal, shows how the character responds to obstacles, and is what defines their characteristics. The needs are not always known to the character and form part of the learning arc, and together these two dynamics will make up the character's journey. So let's start with Sam Witwicky from Transformers First. Sam has reached a developmental milestone, which is getting his first car. And when I say developmental milestones, this is a set of goals and rites of passage we must all reach in life. And they vary from learning to walk, to becoming toilet trained, to making our first friends, to having sex, to getting a job, and so forth. And these are all things which help define our own character as we develop. And this character that we form then makes up our personalities. Now, Sam comes from an upper to middle class background, but he is slightly geeky, awkward, has no confidence with girls, and his utmost desire, or want, is to get laid. So, Sam wants a car to reach the level of decent street cred, and he wants to get laid and lose his virginity. So he gets his car and sets out trying to doink the hottest girl in school, Michaela Baines, who is played by Megan Fox, who we'll come to later. This want causes him to encounter and become familiar with Michaela, and their relationship then drives the film. His wants in terms of getting a car also drives the film, as the car is Bumblebee. However, Sam needs to learn bravery, confidence, loyalty, and nobility. So we have a situation we can all relate to, wanting to lose our virginity and reach developmental milestones, as well as trying to date someone we really like. We've all been teenagers, horny, full of doubt, and so the situation is local to us and enables us to identify with it. In The Relic, scientist Margot is at risk of losing her job because the human antagonist of the story, Greg Lee, is trying to steal her grant money. So Margot's wants are to get the money and keep her team going and have a livelihood, but she needs to have some self-belief, be ruthless, and stand up for herself. We can identify with facing unemployment or worrying about a competitor at work, and also working really hard but never getting the appreciation for it. Margot is lovely, the heart of the story, and a genuinely lovely person, but like Sam, she is flawed in being too nice and a bit spineless. So Margot needs to learn self-belief, bravery, and because the film is about superstition and things which are outside of science, that she cannot rely on science for every single answer. In Jaws, Martin Brody has moved to the island called Amity, and he's going to be chief there, but also it appears a killer shark has now arrived. Brody wants to kill the shark and save the town, but the mayor and other people thwart him at every turn, and people keep dying. Then Brody has to go out to sea and fight the shark with Quint. Brody's greatest fear is the ocean, so Brody wants to stop the shark, but he needs to overcome his fears and stop being bullied by both the mayor and then in the second half of the film, Quint. The idea of wanting to do the right thing but being stopped and shouted down is believable and local to us. And when I say local, I don't just mean geography, although keeping things in an identifiable area helps. I mean local as in emotions and situations we are all connected to, can relate to, and at some point in our life have visited. However, take Godzilla divided by Kong, or Godzilla King of the Monsters, and it's all hollow earths, scientists, military, and things which are not identifiable to people. Take King of the Monsters, where Vera Farmiga is trying to stop the human infection or something, and there is military cartels and secret agencies trying to get King Ghidorah's head, and 11 from Stranger Things screaming and talking about something, and people we don't really care about, and the fate of the world. But there's nothing local, nothing identifiable, and no real human flawed side we can appreciate amidst the tech, monsters, and endless destruction, because at the end of the day, the whole film is just spectacle and there's no real substance to it. Okay, let's move on to empathy, our characters' traits, emotional states, and compassion we feel based on their behaviour and reactions. Empathy comes from the believability of flaws, their wants, and their needs. So, Transformers. Sam is a horny teenager and also a bit of a loser. However, he comes from a privileged background, so his entitlement of getting a car is watered down firstly by his dad conning him about getting a Porsche, then buying him a banged up wreck, as we can all empathise that when we start with something, be it a car or a home, it's not top of the range, it's often quite at the bottom. However, the real empathy comes through Sam's actions, and during the humorous scene where his parents think he is masturbating when he's actually hiding Michaela, "Oh God, she's gorgeous, well done son," they say to him when they find her, we then see a humorous and humble side to Sam as he deals with this, keeps his promise to the Autobots in finding the glasses, and then later on in the film demands that Michaela's juvenile crime record is wiped. He stays loyal to Optimus despite almost dying, and we also learn who he is through his failures. Various things happen to Sam in the movie. He thinks his car has been stolen when it's driven itself away. He loses his trousers to a Decepticon in a fight and looks a bit of a prat. He charms Michaela onto his lap in his car at one point and then has to contain his sexual excitement and his awkwardness. Basically, throughout the film, a little bit of charm and some honour creates a bond with the audience. In The Relic, Margot is painted as hard-working, diligent, popular, and also a little bit weird. Last one to leave the building and always one of the first to arrive, we are made to feel the tragedy of her potential unemployment as she rehearses to an empty room, acts like a cool boss to her staff, and generally works hard but keeps getting trodden down. Also, she stumbles onto a graphic murder scene and this upsets her deeply. However, she never loses her temper, and her innate lack of confidence creates someone who is trodden on, but we want her to do better, get the grant, and beat the bad guy. Okay, Greg Lee is presented as little more than a slimy creep and a one-dimensional character, but using Greg's suck-up bum-licking and spineless brown-nosing, we empathise more with Margot because of her honesty, integrity, self-doubt, and utmost kindness. There's a massive contrast between Margot and Greg, and contrast is what we'll come to later. Even when the Cathoga attacks and butchers a good portion of the museum guests, she steps up, brave as a lion, and, as we are urging both her and Lieutenant DeGusta to get together, DeGusta being played by the late Tom Sizemore in one of his finest roles, his bad cop and narcissism only further defines Margot's timid but stoic characteristics. In Jaws, Brody is blamed for the death of Alex Kintner when it was the mayor who overruled the beach closing. He then almost loses his son to the shark and ultimately goes out to sea and fights said shark whilst getting taunted by Quint and being a human fish out of water compared to the other experts, Hooper and Quint. Again, Brody has psychologically identifiable, relatable and genuine qualities which we empathise with, and they are honesty, decency, genuine guilt, kindness, and also the arc of making several mistakes. But these are all played against his flaws of being bullied and looking weak compared to Quint. Brody wants a bigger boat and is panicking, so Quint smashes the radio and bullies him. The boys compare scars one night they've all got from sharks or fighting. Brody doesn't have any. Brody then urges them to lead the shark back to land and not to use the cage, but Quint goes out to sea and Hooper nearly dies in said cage. But in the end, his bravery and ingenuity kills the shark and makes him the hero. Basically, characters start as flawed, weak, timid, and often nothing we aspire to, but as we can relate to the locality of their flaws and we empathise with genuine characteristics like honesty, bravery, fidelity, and integrity, we come to feel like we know them inside out. Now again, let's come back to Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and the people feel blank, there to explain the next set piece, lacking the human touch, and we aren't connected to them and are unable to root for them as they are just waiting for the next monster fight. Now we come to defined. All the empathy, flaws, wants, needs, and other facets of their stories and journeys are combined in their temperaments to make a fully fleshed character. And a good place to start with this is the 4-temperament model, which is a proto-psychological model which suggests that there are 4 types of person depending on their temperaments. And these are phlegmatic, likes to be left alone, peaceful, complacent, introverted, relaxed, peaceful, and associated with water. Melancholic, also introverted, but devoted, takes things personally, analytical, quiet, and associated with the earth. Sanguine, social, loves change, mixes with people, extroverted, optimistic, social, and associated with the element of air. And finally, choleric, a natural leader, aggressive, quick to judge, and also extroverted, short-tempered, irritable, and associated with fire. The four temperaments was a model which was also used by the ancient Greeks, and Shakespeare used it to cultivate his characters, but in that model, each type was placed next to a type of bodily fluid instead of element of the earth. So there was choleric, which was yellow bile, phlegmatic, which was a blue-green phlegm, melancholic was black bile, and sanguine was red blood. Each one also had a season and time of life, so phlegmatic was autumn and symbolised maturity, whereas sanguine was spring and associated with youth. Basically, Shakespeare took these facets and designed his characters through age, experience, situation, temperament, and used the four types, called the four humours back then, and they explain differences of age, gender, emotions, and disposition. The influence of the four humours changed with the seasons and times of day and with the human lifespan as well. So, heat stimulated action, cold depressed it. The young warrior's choler gave him courage, but the phlegmatic autumnal season produced cowards. Youth was hot and moist, age was cold and dry. In today's writings, it's important that all the flaws and characteristics are also appropriate to age, gender, experience, and environment. So let's use this to go through our characters. In Transformers, Sam Witwicky is sanguine, and he wants change, wants to grow, and to have sex with girls. He's optimistic he can land Michaela even though she is way out of his league, so he is flawed but young and doing what young boys want to do, which is have sex with Megan Fox, drive fast cars, look cool, and get status. In The Relic, Margot is young, but she's older than Sam, and she's also a graduate, so she is phlegmatic. She likes to study, is relaxed and peaceful, but keeps herself to herself and is conscientious and cautious. She's studying to become a great scientist, or professor, or something, but is hurdling the challenges of having to fight for grants and trying to fund her work until she can get more status. In Jaws, Brody is melancholic, older of age but not over the hill. He takes things personally, such as Alex Kintner's death, and gets more depressed as the film progresses towards the halfway point as he takes all of his own faults, failings, and every tragedy personally. Now, taking the four temperaments aside, in terms of psychology, each character needs to be defined by age, experience, personality, flaws, actions, reactions, motivations. And all of these things need to work in symmetry, otherwise you won't be invested or believe in the character. If Sam was a childhood genius buying his own car because he gained a huge amount of money from being a genius, we don't identify and almost resent having a Marty Stew, the male equivalent of a Mary Sue, and there's no underdog to root for. And if Brody was truly Charles in charge and there was no conflict, or he was slapping the mayor about, then we wouldn't feel Mrs. Kintner's slap or see how the loss of Alex and also the near death of his son affected him, because up until then he'd been impotent beneath the forces of politics and the power of the islanders. Brody is an outsider after all, and apart from being reminded of this repeatedly in the film, he acts like it, and despite New Yorkers being tough, this is a city boy lost at sea, and being scared of the sea makes us empathise with his flaws and see him as a rounded character. In The Relic, Margot is beautiful, bright, honest and kind, whereas Greg Lee is a sleazeball. But if Margot was so clever that she blew everyone out the water, then there'd be no jeopardy and nothing for the average viewer to attach their own empathy and insecurities to. Remember, in psychology, when we're making friends or dating people, we look for people we identify with, make us feel connected, and we are interested in because of their personalities. A one-night stand with a hot guy or hot girl might be great, but for a relationship, we need trust and comfort, and when watching characters and following their arcs, wants and needs, much like making friends, We need to see characteristics we identify with and that make us feel congruent and comfortable with them. Anyway, our last bit of the model is dichotomy and parallel. Opposites, polarizations, and distances which need to be bridged. Conflict comes from opposition, but as relationships grow, people grow close as their parallels attract and the distance narrows. Sam Witwicky is from a middle-class family, is a virgin and a nerd, and has a massive crush on Michaela Baines. However, in contrast, Michaela comes from a more working-class background, dates hot guys and jocks, and might know how to fix a car, but she doesn't own one and isn't likely to soon. She also has a criminal record, but getting into the parallel characteristics, she's equally lonely, unfulfilled, and as full as teenage angst as Sam is. So, when they meet and begin their journey and relationship, like all couples, they are a dyad of contrast and stark dichotomies, but through developing relationship and moments which drive the plot, they grow together. Again, when Michaela is found in Sam's room by his parents whilst the Autobots loiter outside, the film slows down for a gentle moment of comedy and parental bickering and a little bit of humour that's both cringy and uncomfortable, and it lets the film breathe. In contrast, come the end, when there's all the fighting and Sam is trying to stay alive and Michaela is driving Bumblebee around so he can shoot stuff, they both step up to the plate before finally ending up as a couple. In The Relic, Margot is a scientist. She thinks superstition is silly and she's a student but also an expert when it comes to her specialist field. Lieutenant DeGusta, on the other hand, is a grizzled cop who absolutely believes in superstition, so much so that he keeps a good luck bullet on him at all times, and he would rather shoot or beat someone up than read a book like the placid and nerdy Margot. However, as the film progresses, Margot's science brain helps lure the Cathoga away from the fleeing survivors, and alongside the shooting DeGusta, they trick, freeze, and fight the monster until DeGusta tries to do the chivalrous thing and lock Margot safely away so he can fight the monster. Anyway, he makes a large cock-up as the monster comes into the room Margot is trapped within, so it's her who has to fight for her life, and, using chemistry, science, and also her wits, she stops the Cathoga and saves the day. However, in parallel, they're both fighting similar fights. Margot needs the Blaisdell grant and has no self-confidence and is about to lose her job. DeGusta, on the other hand, is divorced and has also lost custody of his dog, and is at a place in his life where the future seems equally uncertain. Both Margot and DeGusta are ignored in terms of concerns and safety, and once the mayor shuts down DeGusta's plans to stop the exhibition, it's down to Margot to work out who the Cathoga is, where it came from, how to stop it, and she needs the lieutenant's brawn alongside her brains to do this. In Jaws, Brody isn't an islander and he's treated like an idiot by the mayor and businesses who want the shark stuff quashed and the beaches open. Then, when he goes out on the boat with Quint and Hooper, he is a cop who is scared of water alongside an old sea dog who hunts sharks for a living. Brody is shy, cautious, frightened, out of his depth, and Quint is the polar opposite. A stark contrast to this, and a dark dichotomy to Brody's whiter-than-white innocence of wanting a bigger boat and better resources to kill the shark. However, as they bond and Quint's boat starts to sink, Quint's arrogance usurps him and Brody has to step up and kill the shark. However, in parallel, both Quint and Brody are facing their own types of reckoning. Quint is hunting the biggest shark of his life, and it's his destiny to either kill it or be killed by it, because he will never back down and admit defeat. Brody is also facing his worst nightmare, being on a boat and in the middle of the ocean, and he has been unable to back down because Quint wouldn't let him. So he is also faced with, once Hooper has seemingly been killed, spoiler, he hasn't, he's left with the situation where the shark is his destiny right from the moment that he took that job at Amity PD. So characters make movies and drive stories, and regardless of the robots, CGI or mechanical sharks that never worked, without the human side, all you have is just mindless garbage and nothing to care about. And understanding basic emotions like loss, angst, regret, or being bullied by authority, or maybe having a crush you can't have, all these definable moments which the audience can relate to, and flaws which leave the audience rooting for them to overcome, are essential when making great human characters in a great movie. Secret bases, globe-trotting technology, and military people fighting monsters aren't relatable to the mass audience, and whilst being accurate for military reasons and great fun to watch, no argument, most of the audience hasn't been in a war zone, and just plonking down good-looking people who spout things like, humans are an infection, and we need Kong, the world needs him, leaves us with very little to grasp and have purchase on. For the viewer, we're watching a story, and our story needs a heart, and through flaws, definition, opposites, and empathy, we understand people through their adversity, because that's how the human mind works. It learns via experience, gains wisdom through failure, and when our beloved characters fail, we can feel every inch of their pain. Anyway, that's it for this week's video, so remember that psychology is cool. It would mean a lot to me if you could hit that subscribe button, and please drop a like, share, or even a comment, as there's always a healthy debate on here. And as ever, until next time, I'll catch you later.
We may have somebody on our hands who makes Jeffrey Dahmer look like a Cub Scout.